It's time to be woke, take off your shades, it helps see through the smoke, cause the wicked hide behind the cloak, and if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked, so listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't, is this the fog or smog, cause there's a difference when you breathe it in, so don't let the corporate media take you for a spin, this that morning show, they put you in the know, so I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, 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 yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. It is Wednesday morning. Congratulations, you made it halfway. We've got a great show for you today. Thank you very much for tuning in. We have a special guest joining us, but that's not going to happen until I introduce my lovely and talented co-host, Miss Kerri Barber. Good morning, Kerri.
Hey, good morning, Andy. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And for those of you who are joining us this morning, welcome. If this is your first time tuning in, let's make sure that we keep the conversation civil, but we definitely want to have your comments and feedback. And welcome everyone from the Fred Hampton Leftist Network, as well as House of Public Discourse on iTunes, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, and wherever you may be tuning in this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very happy to have you. My first story that I want to kick off with this morning, I'm going to call your attention to a Gizmodo article that came out. This came not from mainstream media, but I thought it was interesting. A solar company is suing the U.S. Department of Interior to block what would have been the very first wind-solar combination project going on outside of Boston. This would have been somewhere near the harbor where you have wind farms, solar, this sort of thing. But you have a company by the name of Alco, whose leader, their CEO, former tax attorney turned entrepreneur in the solar space in Alco, has decided that he needed to block this particular project. Alco provides solar equipment to Vermont and surrounding areas, so it may be some sort of antitrust move, but that's not what they're arguing. For those of you who have been following Tesla's Skylink, they just recently passed their litmus test with a 3-judge panel. They were being sued by Viasat, who is trying to block more of their solar satellites or their satellites into space. So this is just more on the anti-competition, antitrust front, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on this one in particular, especially since Alco is real big on addressing the effects of climate change, but here they're blocking something that would have provided power to the entire Boston seaboard. So that's big news, and I'm definitely going to follow up on that. But Andy, you were right. We have a fantastic guest here, somebody who is brave enough in this political climate to challenge not just power, but the power in the state. I'd like to welcome somebody that I met as an activist and working out of organizations in Chicago and other areas. Gregory Karr, thank you so much for joining us, and tell us why you're running and what you're running for.
Yeah, so I'm glad to be here. As you said, my name is Gregory Karr. I'm running for Congress in South Carolina's 2nd District. For those who aren't familiar, I'm running against Bolton. For those who still aren't familiar, he is a 21-year Republican incumbent in our district. Most of you know him for screaming out "You lie" in 2009. I wish that were the worst thing about him. So for over 20 years, dude. That was that guy. Yeah.
Oh, it's all becoming clearer now, Gregory.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So for over 20 years, he has made it plain to the people of his district and the people of the country overall that he has zero concern for our daily lives. He has zero concern for our livelihood. And that's become abundantly clear to anybody who may have had any doubts up until the last year and a half, that since COVID hit, he has made it undeniably clear that whether we live or die is of no concern to him. His concern is how he can maintain his base brand, how he can maintain his investments, and how he can maintain the racist power structures that he is allowed to dominate in his district and throughout the state. So I think that a political reckoning is on the table for him, but it is a very narrow window. We know this just from experience with history, that the public memory can be very short, because we have a lot of things that we have to deal with in our day-to-day lives. We have a lot of things that we suffer from and that we struggle with. And so when these windows open up where people are becoming, thoroughly aware that those who are meant to represent them are not only not representing them, but actively harming them, there needs to be a figure who is willing to step forward and call out that abuse, frankly, call out that abuse and give voice to the suffering of working people. When we miss those windows of opportunity, they close very rapidly and they don't open up very soon. So that's why I'm running right now, is because people are aware in our district and around the country. We're seeing time and time again progressive candidates winning against entrenched power, because there is a political reckoning on the table for the types of politicians like Joe Wilson, who have made it plain that they don't care if we live or die.
You brought up a couple of excellent points in that particular answer, so thank you. It was very thorough. First, for people who are watching who don't know Joe Wilson, I am not a spring chicken, and he got into office, elected office, before I was even born. So he's got a little age on him, and with that comes, it's undeniable, you can't really catch up to modern times, modern solutions. So when we had this pandemic hit, Joe was one of those Republicans who was talking about bootstraps and sacrifice your life for the local economy, but at the same time wasn't doing his job to support small businesses and the communities in South Carolina. So how is he reconciling that, and what would you have done a little bit differently?
Well, he's not reconciling it because, like I said, he doesn't care. You talk about his political past. Yeah, he's been in office for a very long time. He's been in the Congress for 21 years, but as you say, for longer than you've been alive, he's been serving an elected office. He interned for Strom Thurmond years ago, to give you some another reference point as to who he is and where his allegiances lie. But specific to COVID and the crisis that has caused, both economically and health-wise, I think the very least he could have supported would have been basically paying workers and business owners to stay at home and to close down for long enough for us to isolate the virus and prevent it from mutating to the point that it has, where now we're up against the very real possibility that this will be an ongoing seasonal thing that we have to face, constantly trying to catch up with it, because we have allowed it to mutate so many times, and we have continued low vaccination rates, continued misunderstanding of the importance of masking and isolating and distancing. And he and his cohorts, Joe Wilson and his cohorts, have played a direct intentional role in muddying the waters around how to deal with this sort of crisis, because they understood that their investment backers would never get behind them supporting a shutdown of businesses, much less a paying of people not to work and a paying of businesses not to operate, which is what we needed to happen. It sounds very counterintuitive to their philosophy, because their philosophy doesn't take into account individual livelihood.
But it does when it comes to that. And the members of Congress and those people who are serving. So which takes me to my next question. We just had all the marches for Medicare for all, and people out in the streets really trying to pressure members of Congress to get this done. And I was looking up statistics on South Carolina. You guys are really doing poorly when it comes to people with access to care or through insurance, that which we know is not necessarily access to a doctor or a hospital, but you've got a whopping 20% without insurance at all, as well as a significant number of the population that is below the federal poverty line. So this is kind of a recipe for disaster. And then taken on top of my own personal critique is there are so few doctors and hospitals who are taking on new Medicaid and Medicare patients that even expanding ACA is going to leave so many people behind. So where do you stand on a program like Medicare for All?
Well, yeah, I mean, you've outlined perfectly why we need Medicare for all, why we need a universal single payer healthcare system, because as long as we allow private insurance to be involved in the provision of essential health services, basic health services, then basically anything other than cosmetic. If we allow healthcare to be dominated by private capital, then that's always going to be the case. If doctors have an option to choose, an insurance coverage, a private insurance coverage rather than Medicaid or Medicare, then in many cases they're going to take that option of the private route. If we have a single payer Medicare for all system, which we need, then that will empower the federal government to negotiate, as they already do with the existing Medicare system, which is one of the most popular and effective and efficient government programs in the history of this country. If we were to expand the coverage of Medicare and extend it to everybody from age 0 to whenever they die, then we would not have to worry about whether or not we have, different rates of insurance coverage, whether people are covered through a marketplace or through their employer or whatever, whether they can have a higher deductible and lower premiums or vice versa. None of that would factor in, because if you got sick, if you needed checkups, whatever your needs were from a health perspective, you would always be able to go see your doctor. And the only conversation to be had would be between you and your doctor, not between you and your doctor and your doctor and your health provider, and you and your health provider, haggling over what health care you deserve. So, like I say, you've outlined.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
you've
Dr.
outlined.
Dooley actually had this funny tweet about that, where she had to spend 20 minutes on the phone with someone from the insurance company who couldn't even pronounce the medication or the condition, only to have that person deny the coverage. So, right. But Gregory, isn't that socialism?
I mean, I choose not to, entertain that pejorative, because frankly, it belies a deep misunderstanding of how basic society operates, and so it's really not worth our time to engage with that sort of attack. At the end of the day, you ask the average person on the street, do you deserve healthcare as a human right? The answer is yes. And if the belief is that we deserve healthcare as a human right, then the only way to guarantee that right is through a single payer Medicare for all system, because as long as profit is a part of the driving force around our healthcare system, it is impossible for it to be a right. So we know that we have to abolish that system.
Absolutely. Now, I have a question for you, Gregory. You have an incumbent that's been there. Well, he probably came over on the Mayflower. How do you deal with, clearly this person has been, so popular for so long, probably resting on his laurels now for decades. And you've got a heavily gerrymandered state that we've talked about that before. What's your way forward? How do you combat that?
Well, I'll first off give you some pushback on the statement that he's been popular for the 21 years that he's been in Congress. He has not been popular, and he is not popular. To borrow a phrase from Jesse Jackson in 1988, Joe Wilson has won consistently by the margins of despair. So he wins because registered voters do not vote. And there are reasons for that. When people don't feel invested in by their government, by their representatives, what stake do they have in the process? So you can talk till you're blue in the face about the reasons why people don't vote and how we feel about that, and should they vote, and why don't they, and how can we get more people registered and motivate them to vote. But at the end of the day, if you're not willing to give voice to people's suffering, you're always going to have those hundreds of thousands, or in some cases, millions of people, depending on the election, who just will not vote because what has it ever gotten them? So we have to recognize that reality, however we may feel about it. There are hundreds of thousands of people in the state of South Carolina, millions of people in the state of South Carolina, hundreds of thousands in the 2nd District who do not vote because they've never been invested in. They've never had anybody seek to represent them from their daily struggle perspective. So once again, Joe Wilson is not popular. He's in office by default because he has never faced a true working class challenge in his life. And so that is the path forward that I see, is to present a true workers' advocacy campaign that tells people, you have been abused, you have been badly abused. I'm going to call out that abuse, and you have the right to do the same. You have the right to stand up against your abuser and say their names. And you have an opportunity to stand up against them. That message has never been delivered to the people of the 2nd District in South Carolina.
Right. Awesome. Kerri, do
I
you have
have
another
a
question?
two-part follow-up on that. Yeah, I want to follow up on that because I myself have gotten a little cynical, right? Because I'm looking at the political landscape and everything that's going on. So if I'm a person in South Carolina or anywhere around the country who is feeling, as you described, Gregory, I'm not being represented, how is your campaign planning to reach people in that space? And then the second part of this question is, let's say you do get the job, you do get elected. How are we supposed to hold you accountable? What is appropriate, and what would you expect?
Well, the two go hand in hand, because I think that the only way that I can get the job is through building, mobilizing mass community engagement, both within and without the electoral process. So that kind of speaks for itself. But to expand upon the point, if we can build a mass mobilization of disaffected people, disaffected voters, disaffected residents of the 2nd District, who can find an avenue by which they can stand up for themselves and align themselves in tandem with that, with a political campaign that stands in solidarity with them and speaks out for their rights, then they can elect not a hero, not a savior, not a leader. They can elect an advocate. And that's what I think members of Congress and members of government in general ought to see themselves as, is not as leaders, not as heroes, not as saviors. We need to see ourselves as advocates for the people that we're meant to represent. So then when we don't, you have you have empowered the movements in the streets, in the communities, on the blocks. You have empowered them to stand up for themselves without regard for who may be the electoral candidate, flavor of the year. They have the power, and they recognize the power to unseat those who have failed them. So I count myself among anybody else who would seek office in saying that if I am not doing my job after elected, if I am not advocating for the working people of the 2nd District of South Carolina, as I have set out to do, as I have promised to do, then by God, put as much pressure as you have in your body on me. But I would like to think that I possess the moral fortitude to be able to hold myself to account. But we know what kinds of pressures exist within the halls of power, and the responsibility is on those who are responsible for electing us to demand everything that we have promised, and not let us slide.
Absolutely. I've a lot of times, even on this show, have said that the people that are complaining about AOC and the squad, that they're not doing what they want them to do, I said, well, who's your rep? Does AOC represent you?
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, that person, you send that person to Washington to represent your interests in your county or your district, right? That's the person you need to contact if they're not representing you properly.
Yeah. But by that same token, I will always welcome pressure from anybody from any district, because it is well to note that even though members of Congress are elected locally, they serve federally. And so, our electorate is hyper local, but our responsibility is national. So I will clarify from my position that pushback is warranted from anywhere in the country.
Kerri, do you have
I
another
like
question?
that because, yeah, I do. I like that because even though AOC is an example, we're not picking on AOC, is not my direct representative. Her vote matters to what happens to me in my state. So yeah, you're right. It becomes a weird locality. So let's talk about DC. We have seen some amazing progressive candidates do the impossible and get elected, and then they go to DC and we're kind of left shaking our heads like, what happened? You said bring the ruckus, and now it's just us. So Gregory, how are you gonna handle Mama Bear and Papa Schumer if they're opposed to what yours is clearly a progressive agenda? So how are you gonna handle that?
Yeah, I'm not, as you'll see on my website, if you go look at it, carforcongress.com, I'm not going to Congress to make nice with anybody, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or anywhere in between. My intent is not to go there to make friends. It's not to go there to network. It's not there to advance my career. My career has been in organizing and activism. That's what I've dedicated my life to for over 15 years. And my sole mission in going to Congress is to address the failure of leadership within those halls of power and the failure of advocacy. Because at the end of the day, people are going into Congress and they are ingratiating themselves to their newfound colleagues in power. And that's a very natural thing if you're looking to make that your the rest of your life, as long as you're able to work, that you intend to stay in Congress. I really have little concern for whether I'm in office for 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, however long, outside of my intention to, as you borrowed the phrase from AOC, bring the ruckus. It's not a phrase that I would naturally use, but I think that it speaks to what does have to happen. We have to have people who are willing to go to Congress with the sole intention of making trouble for those who are abandoning the working people of this country. So if that gets me ostracized, if that gets me isolated from the best committee positions, well, I'll fight that fight and insert myself into power as best I can. But everything that I intend to do from that position, from that office, is to make trouble for those who have abandoned us.
I like it. Make trouble for the abandonment. Yeah, I do appreciate that. So while we're talking about getting to Congress and everything else, there's a huge lift ahead of you. This is literally a marathon run to run for any office, and you've chosen one that is so high profile. So what has the response been so far? I've seen coverage from Fox News and from The Hill, other publications who are, very interested in this race because Joe Wilson has been so entrenched. So what kind of response are you getting from your local party, from the state party? Has excitement started to build? I know you have a kickoff coming next month, like August next week. So tell me a little bit about what has the response been, and how are you feeling as a candidate for your party?
So yeah, we did get some, as you mentioned, we did get some very early prominent coverage of our initial announcement. We were picked up by The Hill and of course the chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party took notice very quickly and kind of lashed out, basically saying that they look forward to beating the Democrats again. Made a reference to our left wish list or whatever phrase he used. Obviously, you and I know, we all know how dismissive and offensive that is to the people that they claim to represent, which is the everyday working man. They're they're fools and they're liars if they believe that that they can ever speak to the concerns of working people, and so to me that's just water off of a duck's back. But most of what we're doing right now in the context of my campaign is working to expand our footprint, working to expand our name recognition. Because one thing that I do not have is a recognizable brand. I am a first-time candidate. My background, as I said, has been in the trenches, organizing and activism, which doesn't necessarily give you a very high profile. So that I do not have. But what I do have is experience fighting for working people with working people. And so everything we're focused on right now, and why I'm happy to be on your show today, is with the intention of expanding people's awareness of who I am, where I'm running, and why I'm running. Because if people understand that there is somebody advocating for them and their suffering, and against their suffering rather, then I think the excitement will be very high. At this point, though, I cannot honestly claim that there is a groundswell of excitement around our campaign. We just announced this month, but I think that very big things are coming if we can get our message out to progressives who can then boost our message and get it out to every corner of the state, the district, and the country. As far as involvement with the state Democratic Party and the county parties in my district, I will be working to communicate and coordinate with them wherever possible. As it stands, I am the only Democratic challenger that Joe Wilson has. I have seen no direct indications of any other progressive Democrat being willing to step forward and wage this fight. So from my perspective, it's me versus Joe Wilson, and it will be me versus Joe Wilson in November of 2022. If that changes, then that will shake out within the Democratic primary. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm laser focused on what the fight is between my progressive workers platform and Joe Wilson's thorough abandonment and disregard for human life and dignity.
Excellent.
Really exciting stuff. Excellent. Oh, I'm sorry, Andy. Go ahead. I'm super excited to see this.
I just had one quick question for Gregory. Gregory, have you ever heard of Stephanie Kelton?
I can't say that I have.
Okay. All right. Then we have some reading material to go over, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Kerri?
Andy's alluding to the federal appropriations process and the difference between bootstrapping and what the deficit actually measures, that it's not debt. Gregory, is any of this familiar to you?
Yeah, you're talking about MMT.
That's correct.
Yep.
Are you, have you looked into MMT and have a understanding of it?
I have no claim on expertise, but I'm familiar with the basic theory. But okay. I couldn't speak intelligently on it, so I won't try.
Well, that's why I suggested Stephanie Kelton's book, The Deficit Myth, because it lays it out very nicely.
I will be sure to read that.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, with this exciting campaign kicking off in just a short amount of time, and you need all the help you can get, particularly in getting the name recognition and getting the outreach and really getting your message in front of voters, particularly those who have been disenfranchised for so long. So how can people get involved, and what do you need right now as a candidate challenging such a powerful opponent?
So what I need right now is online engagement. I know that seems vapid, it seems empty, but that is a very quick and effective way to get my name out there. So for people who are outside of my district, South Carolina 2nd District, whether you're somewhere else in South Carolina or somewhere else in the country or somewhere else in the world, what I need from you chiefly is to go to my Facebook page, go to my Instagram account, go to my Twitter, go to my website, and really amplify our message. What you'll find on my website, carforcongress.com, is that there is a lot more policy addressed than you often find within the first month of any candidate's campaign. I have been very intentional in setting up that website about making sure that there is, relative clarity as to where I stand on key issues. I won't say that everything that will be there is there now. It'll be a living, breathing document, that website, but you can go there today and have, I think, a pretty good sense of who I am and who I stand with. Beyond amplifying our message and our campaign online, the fact of the matter is campaigns are pricey endeavors. Particularly for people running in these kinds of races where you're up against entrenched power and you have no prominent brand of your own, you have no name recognition to speak of. We need money. I hate to say it, but we need money. So we do have an Act Blue for those who are inclined to contribute on that platform. For those who prefer not to, I'm happy to share my mailing address. For those who would prefer to send a check, or whatever the case may be, we need your help, because this is going to be a very expensive race. I think particularly if other Democrats do announce during the primary, this is going to be a very expensive effort to ensure that we have an actual workers advocate going up against Joe Wilson in the general election, because I do believe that that's the only way that that Joe Wilson is unseated, is through that kind of a campaign, that kind of a challenge that he has never faced before. So need your couch, your pocket change, your couch pennies, and if you have more than that, I need it too. So however you can help, we need your help. So I will never claim to be able to do something like this on my own.
Well, that's how we all operate in this space.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that goes to your message about representing the working people. You're obviously not a millionaire, not a billionaire. So for those of you who are watching, if you have ever uttered the phrase, I'm Dem enter, or we just need to get more progressives in Congress and that's how we win, here's Gregory Karr. It's Karr, Karr, for Congress. Here you go. This is your next progressive that you want to add to that Progressive Caucus. Add them to the squad, get all of this done. So if that's you in that space, here's your candidate. If you're one of those people who has checked out of politics and you're just disillusioned with what's going on, I can tell you personally from the little bit of work that I did with Gregory, this guy's a badass. So I believe that when he gets to Congress, he will live that message. And if he doesn't, I got his phone number. So I will lean heavily on Gregory for that. So thank you so much, Gregory. I know I'm sorry, Gregory.
Yeah.
Well, I already talked to my own. Go ahead.
I look forward to I look forward to the pressure.
Excellent. So I know you got to run to another appointment, but we thank you so much for joining us and telling your story and getting the word out. Can we, as you get super, super popular, can we count on you to come back and give us an update on how things are going?
You absolutely can. And hopefully by that time I will have read Kelton's book.
Okay. Excellent. That's a good answer.
Yeah, you got homework. Right. Any last thoughts that you want to leave our audience with about your campaign, the fight ahead, or who you are as a candidate? Go for it, Gregory.
And give us your links too, please.
Yeah, I mean, just to put it as succinctly as I can, if you're a working person anywhere and you're struggling, you're hurting, you're not alone. You have advocates, you have a voice, you have a fist. Use them.
Nice, nice. Thank you so much. And your websites again, you've got an Act Blue account and carforcongress.com?
Yes, and the Act Blue is linked directly through the website.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Gregory. And we're going to let you get out of here, and we will get back to some basic administrivia, talk to our audience a little bit. But thank you so much. And thank you for stepping up to run for office. It's so important.
Thank you for inviting me.
Take care, Gregory.
You as well.
So that's exciting news to me because, like I said, I have known Gregory through other endeavors, and I know his work. I know how passionate he is about the progressive causes. So this is one potential candidate I really don't have a whole lot of reservation about living the message and walking the talk when he's in DC. I think that, this is particularly why I'm excited about this campaign. So we'll have to keep on him about his homework for the deficit myth and MMT because we know he's going to get flooded with that. How are you going to pay for it? And the pay fors and the pay goes and the bootstraps. We know that's coming. Absolutely.
Yes. See John Yarmuth on C-SPAN.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was a jaw-dropping moment. And if you're watching and you don't know what we're talking about, John Yarmuth, who's the chair of the budget committee, but I'm going to get it wrong. But the chair of the budget committee was on C-SPAN talking about how money actually works, federal appropriations process, and all of that live on TV. And I know Stephanie sent a tweet with a screenshot, and she's like, "I'm going fishing. John's got it."
Exactly. Well, amazing. Warren Mosler, we had him on Macro and Cheese the following weekend, and he's like, "Yeah, I can't add to that. He's got all the talking points. He was right on the money. It just came out of nowhere." And Warren Mosler, if you don't know, is basically the UG of MMT. Right. He was the guy on the ground floor that basically coined the phrase and got people involved. So if anybody's going to know, it's going to be Warren. Right.
Well, it was interesting because I was having an off the record conversation with another congressional member. And we were talking a little bit about MMT and their familiarity with it. And they made a statement like, "Well, but my Republican colleagues don't seem to know." And I went, "Oh, no. They all know." And they know it because we know Mnuchin pulled them all into that little tiny phone booth and explained it all to them so that they could release all of the funds for COVID relief to big companies themselves, their stock buddies, and all of that sort of thing. So they're well aware of how money actually works in private behind closed doors. In front of the camera, they're going to say silly things like, "How are you going to pay for it?" and pay goes and tax and spend. So yeah,
absolutely.
It'll be interesting.
No, it is.
Yeah, so this is really all I have. I was so excited to see because I've done a couple different stories that all deal with South Carolina. And Andy, you and I did one about Denmark, South Carolina, and their water crisis there. Yes. Most people may not realize it, but those people were literally being poisoned in their city water. And so we did that story. And then I did the interview with Brenda Bryant and the corruption going on in South Carolina with the judiciary and how judges, South Carolina is like one of only 2 states where the people do not elect their judges. They get appointed by other attorneys in the legislature, state legislature. Well, that's so ripe for corruption. And Brenda Bryant.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that system.
Right. Well, her story follows in line with the interview we did with Kerri Kasem about people literally being kidnapped by the state given guardians, and all of their estate assets being liquidated and taken by these guardians and lawyers and probate. So yeah, wow, Gregory has his work cut out for him, because it feels like, and I think he alluded to it, you have decades of inaction, decades of no advocacy in that state alone.
Right. And it's with the gerrymandering, it's just, and this is, I remember that conversation that I had with Jen Perlman, talking about how she had to run as a Democrat in Florida because the only way to win in that so heavily Democratic gerrymandered district was in the primary. You were pretty much guaranteed to win if you could win the primary, because it was so heavily gerrymandered towards the Democrats. This is not just a Republican Party problem, people. This is going on both sides of the aisle.
Oh, absolutely. And right now, if you're not aware of it, every state, because of the census numbers, every state had a mandate to put together a citizens committee, and that was by May 30th. A citizens committee to oversee the next redistricting. So right now in your state, there's a group of citizens who have been appointed to this committee who are working on redistricting. You can go find out information if you go to your state legislature and just type in redistricting city committee or citizens committee. You should have that information, and it should all be public. All of these meetings and conversations should be public. So you'll be able to see if these folks who have been appointed to map out districts are actually doing right by you as a voter and for democracy, or if they're leaning in towards party loyalty over democratic process.
Mm-hmm.
So just
I'm not saying that Gregory's district is gerrymandered, but looking at it, I think its nickname should be the Kraken.
Yeah, it's almost like it was somebody on it with an Etch-a-Sketch on a roller coaster, the way that those little, I'm like, this house, but not that house. These two houses, not that house.
Here's a 2-year-old with an Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I just dated myself there.
Well, that's both of us. But thank you so much for tuning in today. And we actually have another candidate who is going to be joining us on Friday live. I'm delighted to see so many people, despite the headlines and the chaos. There are people who are still stepping up and willing to run. And before you get out there criticizing, if you're one of those people who, since we're going with the toddler metaphor, if you were the toddler in daycare knocking over blocks rather than building them, I need you to sit back for a little bit, because I don't think people appreciate how hard it is to run for office. And it's not just the monumental amount of tasks that are before you. It takes a personal toll on your physical health, your family, your relationships, everything. You are literally putting your life on hold for 2 years to deal with a whole lot of stuff just to get a job and go deal with more chaos in DC or at your state legislature. So it really takes a very strong individual to not only step up and say, I will run, but run a good campaign. So please make sure you're supporting somebody, if not nationally, locally, who decided to run for office.
And especially we're seeing that, a lot of these progressive candidates are having to run twice because they don't have the name recognition the first time. And, so it's like, am I going to do this again? Kind of the same way when you say you're going to reshingle your roof the first time. Do you want to do it a second time? Well, same idea, right?
That's exactly right. And I am personally working on a few former candidates, asking them to run again, and we'll see how successful I am in that endeavor. Just kind of poking the bear a little bit, but I would love to see these great progressives run, regardless of what party they decide to run for. So So thank you everybody for tuning in. Appreciate it. Please join us again on Friday. And that's all I got from sunny New Mexico. Andy, any last thoughts you want to take us out with?
No, I think we're just going to call it a day. Thank you very much, Kerri. Great interview. And everyone, thank you for watching. Please support the Fred Hampton Leftists, which Kerri and I are proud members of. If you like our video or any of the Fred Hampton Leftist videos, please click like and subscribe and click the little bell so you get notifications when our videos come up. And we are self-funded, so we appreciate any donations in, either on our Patreon or through super chats or anything. It all goes a very long way with us. We are self-funded. It's really the only way that we keep going. So we appreciate your support and thank you for watching. We will see you here bright and early on Friday morning. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keeping it G. Whoa.